Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the newest album from Jon Pardi called Heartache Medication. Okay, I'll just say it. In my reviews of Jon Pardi up to this point, the majority of the problem, it's me. And it's one of those utterly exasperating issues as a music critic where, yes, to the mainstream Nashville country listener, Jon Pardi represents a sound that is entirely up my alley and should be getting all the praise in the world in the current subset of neo-traditional country revivalists that we're seeing, especially in his choice of instrumentation and production. And I can see on the surface how Jon Pardi basically answers all my major complaints about the corporate pop pandering side of Nashville by delivering a rich vintage timbre that could have easily been imported straight from the early 90s, and yet I've been kind of lukewarm on him, at best, right from when I covered his debut back in 2014. Don't get me wrong, I like that his success is nudging Nashville in that organic, neo-traditional direction, in my opinion, the right direction for them. But between never quite liking his vocal timbre and songwriting that just feels a little underwhelming, plus the wealth of indie country acts that just do this sort of sound better, I know it makes me come across like a country music hipster that's not getting on board with the mainstream act, even though I'd argue that just because you have a neo-traditional sound doesn't mean the delivery or songs hold up. And while the country music hipster part is true, I actually did have some hope that with his mainstream niche firmly established, he'd be able to double down and not have to rely on consistently his worst and most generic songs as singles. So I really did want to like what he was going to deliver with Heartache Medication. It really did seem like he was going in the right direction, and this is probably going to be a success. So did the album actually deliver? Well, here's the thing. I can comfortably say that Heartache Medication is exactly the sort of album you would expect coming from Jon Pardi. It will definitely serve his die-hard fans and will inevitably move the sort of units to get a respectable number of singles on Nashville country radio. That's good. And yet, while there are some pretty great individual deep cuts here, I'm left with the lingering feeling that Jon Pardi has not produced an album that's really all that interesting or distinctive from the larger pack. Very much passable, but if you're looking to make that sort of neo-traditional country album that takes a step beyond middle of the road, this isn't really it, no matter how much Jon Pardi wants to emphasize that in his marketing. Hell, that might be the most jarring thing about this album, because Jon Pardi is self-aware enough to realize that this particular sound in country is not the norm in Nashville, and that he's placing himself in a defiantly backwards-looking group by embodying it so proudly. You don't open up your album with a cut like Old Hat if you're not reading your own hype and your own press packet, especially when you follow it later on the album with a song like Call Me Country, which will rattle through a list of traditional country cliches and outlaw country acts, and then say that he is a ghost on the radio. Which, yeah, it fits his defiant sentiments, but it's also not really true for two big reasons. The first being how his embrace of the neo-traditional sound is actually giving him some real commercial success. It's not like he's Mike and the Moon Pies or anyone out of the indie camp that's produced by Dave Cobb, or even some of the mainstream camp produced by Dave Cobb. And more to the point, when you dig a little bit deeper into the songwriting and storytelling that Jon Pardi does have, he's not really singing about the freight trains and the outlaws and the prisons either. Most of his songwriters just give him a slightly old-fashioned spin on a lot of modern relationship songs, which on this album tend to span various degrees of intoxication. And you know what? That is fine, don't get me wrong. But if you're playing for an older style and trying to lean into your authenticity, it's a little bit jarring when the actual text doesn't really embody it. Hell, I've said it before, but dig into the actual song structures, and they really aren't that far removed from what's popular right now, especially with some of the listing songs, just given a neo-traditional sheen of paint. And unfortunately, that does leave the album feeling a little bit underweight when it comes to deeper song topics, most of which fall towards drinking songs and some pretty simplistic love songs. But you know what? There are a few exceptions that show a little bit more growth, a little more wisdom. Ain't Always the Cowboy, it's a really good song where she leaves him because the chemistry just isn't there, she's taken to the road, and he takes it pretty well. And both Nobody Leaves a Girl Like That and Love Her Like She's Leaving, they're really solid love songs. And the duet Don't Blame It on Whiskey with Lauren Alaina, co-written by Eric Church and Miranda Lambert, and you can really tell, shows both partners struggling to confront the fractures in their failing relationship with the alcohol while only really masking the problem. It's not the central issue. Although given how pleading the song can feel and how the souse the rest of the album is, the swapping out of whiskeys as the punchline of Me and Jack, prime example, it might actually reflect some deeper dependency that I kind of wish was at least considered in the subtext, especially considering Lauren Alaina has released songs like Same Day, Different Bottle before back in 2017. But that's kind of indicative of the album as a whole. You keep expecting more lyrical details to slide in and make these songs a little more developed and complex, instead of playing to the most basic common denominator without a lot of unique flair in the poetry. Again, it's not bad, but rarely elevated to greatness. And hell, that might be my biggest indictment of Jon Pardi as a singer too. He's got a lot of twang, he's got a lot of energy, and he does fit over this production, but his more nasal brang tone doesn't show a lot of subtlety or dynamics in his timbre, which doesn't really bring a lot of emotional range to really elevate his rather conventional subject matter. But hey, you know what? At least we got that neo-traditional sound, right? The warm acoustic guitar, the sharp electric guitar, the rounded but firm bass and percussion, plenty of pedal steel and fiddle and saloon piano, all the tones that I grew up with and really like, right? Well, okay, provided you can look past the occasional programmed hand clap that stiffens the groove and sticks out like a sore thumb, looking at Old Hat for that, or a lo-fi filter that's tacked onto the vocals in a very thin attempt to add some sort of bite to the song, like the honky-tonk stomper Me and Jack, or the rather clunky Oughta Know That. But you know what? It really is the music that works the best for me on this album, even if I am a total sucker for it. From the warm mid-tempo fiddles and guitar interplay on the title track, the hook of Nobody Leaves a Girl Like That really sticks in my head and will not leave, the aching fiddle lines anchoring Ain't Always the Cowboy and Don't Blame It on Whiskey, to the piano foundation across Just Like Old Times, and the rather reserved warmth of Love Her Like She's Leaving. There's generally a really pleasant, homespun vibe across a lot of the project, and I won't deny, it is a sound that just naturally clicks. I grew up with this sort of thing. Hell, the biggest departure from that sound is probably Tequila Little Time, which in blending some of the horns with the fiddle for the main melody, it sounds kind of a little ridiculous and playing towards island territory that Kenny Chesney frankly does better, but for as flagrantly corny as it is, I've certainly heard worse in this lane. That being said, if you're looking for Jon Pardi to do more with the sort of sound or production, especially in the face of more textured, interesting production and tunes you might hear in the mainstream or in the indie scene, you might wind up thinking that a lot of this album, particularly on its second half, kind of blurs together, and the hooks don't quite hit as hard as they could. Not bad, but not really great either. But to pull it all together, man, albums like this frustrate me, because if you're putting it in the context of all the other country released this year, not just the mainstream, Jon Pardi doesn't do a lot wrong, but also not a lot exceptional either. He probably has his highest ratio of solid to great songs of any album that he's released, and I am gonna call it a good sign he's able to make this sort of sound marketable in the mainstream. That's a good progression, but ask for even a little bit more and I can see you feeling kind of underwhelmed. I think my biggest issues at this point remain in the writing, taking that next step to really hit home, maybe get a little bit more personal or complex. But in the meantime, extremely strong 6 out of 10, recommended for the fans, but if you've been keeping your ear to the ground, this album really won't blow your mind. I still wanted to cover it properly to emphasize how at least one subset of mainstream Nashville is going in the right direction. Just gotta keep moving then, one step or one drink at a time. We'll have to see. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Jon Pardi fans, look, I really wanted to love this, but when you're coming from more of the indie set and you've heard a lot of this sound just done more interestingly, like Reba's album this year or Mike and the Moon Pies, that was a really great album that really caught me off guard, this just isn't as... It's not as spectacular. It's decent, but it's not great. You want to buy or stream it, links down there below, and the poll's up there for y'all to tell me how wrong I am, so are the comments, but hey, that's just how I feel. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you're looking for more albums for me to cover, or you want to see that or the newest episode of Billboard Breakdown, links are in the card right over there. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.